The first round of the 2025 NFL draft class is in the books, and it was a fun one. After months of speculation, smoke screens, and conversations about Shedeur Sanders, one thing is for sure. We have at least one more day of speculation about Shedeur Sanders. While I'm going to spend most of this video talking about some of the big moves and the shocks of the draft, I do want to quickly mention what the heart of this draft truly was. And that was the 17 offensive and defensive linemen that were taken in the first round, with plenty more to come in day two. And as far as prospects, there was a little bit of everything in this first round. The 49ers and Bengals took big swings on high upside prospects in Michael Williams and Shamir Turner. And on the other end of the spectrum, the Patriots, Cowboys, and Seahawks went with the safer, high floor prospects that should be plug and play starters from day one. The first true shock of the draft came when the Jacksonville Jaguars traded up with the Browns to land Travis Hunter. And look, you probably don't need me to tell you about Travis Hunter, but the Jacksonville Jaguars probably just handled their two biggest needs in cornerback and wide receiver with one player. The Jags defense forced just 6 interceptions last season, and there isn't too much to be excited about outside of Brian Thomas in the passing game. But honestly, I think this trade is a win-win for both teams. The Browns were able to land one of the top defensive players in the class in Mason Graham, along with a second-round pick in a range where they can get another premium player at the beginning of day two. And probably most importantly, they acquired a premium pick next year, which could very well end up being ammo for a top tier quarterback in that 2026 draft class. And look, maybe they find their quarterback of the future at the beginning of day two, but this leaves all the options on the table for a Browns organization that is inching closer to getting out from under the burden of the Watson contract. The next shock would come just a few picks later with the Carolina Panthers taking Tetairoa McMillan 8th overall. And look, to be honest, in retrospect, this probably shouldn't be as big of a shock as it was. The Panthers were just mocked to take Jalen Walker for weeks, and it felt like they were pretty much locked into taking a defensive player. But the reality was they addressed defense and free agency, and they were an Xavier Legette letdown season away from being in deep trouble if they didn't prioritize the wide receiver position. So we probably shouldn't be all that surprised that they took the consensus top wide receiver outside of Travis Hunter and made him the pick at 8th overall. And look, I really like McMillan. I think this is the right pick for the Panthers, even over a Jalen Walker, who I had mocked there. I would have liked that pick as well, but this makes a whole lot of sense. I will say, I think at first I was very hesitant to call McMillan a top 10 pick. In most classes, I don't think he would have been. But the reality is, after some of the top names in this class, you fell out of elite players and you kind of fell into this kind of wide middle. McMillan was certainly the best wide receiver on the board. He's a first round pick in most years. I just don't think he's a top 10 pick most years. I think he's probably, a borderline top 20, top 25 type of guy. But in this class, upside, superstar potential was there. All of those things lined up, and the Panthers went ahead and took him. I'm excited about the pick. I like the pick, but it was certainly a surprise. One of the biggest shocks in the entire draft to me was the Chicago Bears taking Colson Loveland over Tyler Warren at 10th overall. This was a move that I think shocked most Bears fans and had Colts fans jumping for joy at the possibility of getting Tyler Warren at 14th overall. I'm not going to overreact or give you some hot take on how this was dumb or smart or whatever. The reality is both of these guys were top 15 prospects. The fact that one went in front of the other isn't really that big of a deal, but for Tyler Warren, who to me I thought was a top 5 prospect in this entire class and was exclusively mocked inside the top 10, I just didn't see it coming. I don't think a lot of people saw it coming, and it certainly was a jaw-dropping moment for me on draft day. As far as the analysis for the pick, for whatever that's worth, I don't have a problem with this. If Ben Johnson and the Chicago Bears think that they got their next Sam Laporta, awesome. Slam dunk pick. send it, we're good. But this was definitely a dream scenario for the Indianapolis Colts, and I can't wait to see how he fits on a team that got a total of 467 yards and 2 touchdowns from 4 different tight ends last season. The next 10 picks were fairly uneventful, with teams prioritizing the line of scrimmage until the Texans were on the clock. Now, the Texans were rumored to want to trade up to replace the Laremy Tunsil-sized hole on their offensive line, but instead they trade out of the first round altogether to give the New York Giants the opportunity to draft their next signal caller in Jackson Dart, in a move that pretty much everybody saw coming. Now, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen came into this draft on the hot seat, and some people thought that was going to be enough for the Giants to take a quarterback at 3, which would have been an insane reach. Instead, they sent 2 third-round picks to move up 9 spots and secure their guy. And look, I did think that price was kind of steep considering the narrative that this draft class has a very wide middle, but at the end of the day, you have to do what you have to do for a quarterback, and the Giants come out of this draft with Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart as their quarterback, possibly quarterback of the future, and a superstar at the defensive end edge position. That is an awesome slam dunk draft for them already. Whatever else they do is icing on the cake. It's gravy on the icing that's on the cake, whatever you want to call it. It's awesome. The Giants did a great job. They maneuvered this draft the way they had to get the guys that they had to hopefully put together a football team that is geared in the right direction to win finally, because it's been a lot of meh for a lot of years, and I am excited to see what Brian Daboll can do now that he finally has his guy. And in all reality, he'll probably get fired after week 6, continuing the cycle of mediocrity. We didn't have to wait long for the last massive move in this draft. The Falcons moved back into the first round to land another edge rusher in James Pierce Jr., in a move that has the potential to reshape both franchises. Now, that's probably a little hyperbolic, but I do understand what the Falcons were thinking. They're sitting at 15th overall with the plan to take the best front 7 player available that falls to them. That player happened to be Jalen Walker, who I imagine they didn't expect to be there. He was exclusively mocked inside the top 10 leading up in the final days of the draft, and it felt like it was a fever dream for him to possibly land 15th. Now, I personally feel like that certainly was his range, considering he's a 6'1" defensive end edge. I don't know exactly what position he'll play on defense, and I do think that's part of the problem with Jalen Walker and probably why he did fall a little bit. But regardless, that was the best player on their board. They take him, and I have to imagine that James Pierce Jr. would have been the pick if Jalen Walker was already off the board. With James Pierce Jr. falling down, keeps getting there at 26 overall, they felt like they had to make a move to completely fix their biggest need in one afternoon. The Rams, on the other hand, opt not to pick in the first round for the 8th time in 9 years. To put that in perspective, their last 4 first-round picks were Jared Verse, Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, and Aaron Donald. Aaron freaking Donald was 4 first-round picks ago, and we're not going to talk about the guy that was taking 11 picks before that in this draft. We're not going to do that, Rams fans. So basically, the Rams turned a 3rd-round pick this year into a 1st-round pick next year just for sliding down 20 spots in a draft where there is, like I said, a very wide middle. And look, let's be honest, they were probably going to take like an Omar Norman Lott or a Braden Swinson or somebody like that in the 1st round anyway, and they'll probably still be there in the 2nd. So they probably didn't give up too much value to move down, and they turned a 3rd into a 1st. I think that is a slam dunk pick for the Rams, especially with Matthew Stafford seemingly on a year-to-year deal with the Rams right now, and next year's looking like a pretty solid quarterback class at this point. Way too early to say that, but the Rams certainly have some ammo in that class. The rest of the draft went off without any big surprises. The Eagles continued their tradition of a premium SEC talent falling in their lap. Side note, I thought it was kind of interesting. The Eagles and Chiefs, they did swap picks. I'm not really sure why. I don't know what the backstory was there, but they both took players that had some injury concerns at the very end of the first round. But both players were considered much higher valued prospects as far as the entire draft community. And I think a lot of like NFL guys were talking about these guys as top tier players. I heard Josh Simmons, who the Chiefs took at 32 overall, was a potential top 10 pick if he didn't have the knee injury. He had a pretty serious knee injury, which definitely hampers his play. But it just goes to show you, I mean, look, the rich get richer when you give teams the opportunity to take premium talent late in the draft just because they might not be able to start week one of their rookie year. I mean, guys, this is a marathon, not a sprint, but too many franchises are looking at the draft and thinking, what can you do for me right now? And it does have a lot to do with the fact that you don't get to keep this job for very long, and you a lot of times can't afford to wait, and a lot of times you're going to miss anyway. So why would we take a chance on missing a guy who's going to be hurt? Why would we take a chance on a guy who is going to have to develop in his head instead of on the practice field? I get it, but man, it seems like all the good teams just take the best player and trust their training staff and trust the process and trust that a guy, while he might not be healthy today, he's going to be healthy at a point in his rookie season to be very productive. So I don't know. That's total side note. We'll close out the show just talking about some of the players that didn't go in the first round. Will Johnson, to me, I'm wearing the jersey that I wore during draft night. I'm a Dolphins fan. I badly wanted the Dolphins to take Will Johnson at 13th overall. I didn't think there was a chance in hell he would fall out of the first round. That ankle injury must be pretty damn serious. I don't know what to expect by that, but medicals must have been a thing. Mike Green, another guy who fell out, there's off the field there for him, so that's not maybe the biggest shock, but man, I thought he was the second best edge rusher in this class. So I thought talent would prevail a little bit there, and it didn't. We'll see where they go. And then obviously the Shedeur Sanders is a conversation. Got to mention it here real quick. I'll just be 100% honest with you guys. I always thought he was a second-round pick. If you go back and look at some of the older stuff that I had on this channel, I talked about him going in the second a lot. I did mock drafts for the Browns and Giants, and I think I gave them Shedeur Sanders both times. That was at a point where I didn't think the Giants would be as high on Jackson Dart. Full disclosure, I really wasn't as high on Jackson Dart. I did not have him as a top 4 quarterback in this class. So that's just me. That's just my take. Obviously, NFL guys probably know a lot more than Johnny Internet over here. But, I like to watch, and I have a little bit of an opinion, so I take that for what it is. I'm not shocked at all that Shedeur Sanders falls out. Apparently, the interviews were bad. I think the talent on the field is just okay. And when you combine those two, why are we going to take a shot on that? And conventional wisdom will tell you he's probably going to go really early on day 2. One of these quarterback needy teams are going to take a shot on him. I get that. There is a little part of me, just this tiny part of me, that thinks he could fall farther. He could end up being middle of the second, late second, somewhere in that ballpark. It's just a hunch, not really basing it on anything, but a little bit of my assessment of the player and just my assessment of what it seems like the NFL views him. Could the Steelers get him in the second round? I mean, no, because they don't have a second round pick. That was dumb. But I think late second doesn't feel completely out of the realm of possibility. I know that's a long shot. I'm just throwing it out here, and look, that will be either proven right or wrong probably 6 or 7 hours after this video is uploaded. So we'll see. Guys, that's all I got. If you appreciated this content, it helps me out a whole lot if you like and subscribe. It means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.